when you sort of rob Peter to pay Paul, to use the aphorism, I think that it does catch up in the end, and you end up not being able to do those kinds of deep work that you want to do.
Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast, friends. This is Kim Skorupski. On today's H3 Habits and Hacks from Hopkins, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Alistair Kent. Alistair, how are you doing today?
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, good. I'm great as good as can be sitting in the basement. But I wanted to have you first start by introducing who you are and what you're doing here at Hopkins.
Sure thing. So I'm Alistair Kent. I'm a trauma and emergency general surgeon and surgical critical care doctor and part-time health services researcher and quality improvement project person. I've been at Hopkins for about 5 years now. I trained at Ohio State before that for general surgery and then finished up fellowship training here and stayed on as faculty after that.
And I'm sure this past 10 or so months has been interesting when you say part-time researcher. I wonder if you'll be able to share in part of your habits and hacks about leadership, how you've been able to manage during a global epidemic, trying to take care of patients on the front lines while attending to your academic career and research and program building. But what did you want to share with us, things you do that have made you a leader here?
Sure. Well, I think right off the bat, thinking about how do you organize clinical service responsibilities, your research interests, your mentorship, and the other various projects, I think that becomes like really a major part of what I think about and do in terms of being able to keep up. A couple of years ago, I started approaching it with a mindset of running it like a small corporation in terms of my life, career, et cetera. And so there are multiple calendars that overlap for the different channels of projects that I'm working on or things I have to do at the house or, clinical responsibility or research. And they're all sort of somewhat themed so they can be pretty efficiently looked at a glance. And then just making sure that is streamlined in a way that information is always available, either through phone widget that I don't have to click on, and reducing the number of tap interfaces and that kind of thing to allow more rapid access to that information. It kind of partial or as an adjunct to that, I started using project management software to help get a more strategic view of these different projects and what do you choose. And I think a lot of the challenge has been in these types of positions, you often are not able to focus uniquely on one or two projects because the time sensitivities of other various tasks are range from a few seconds to a few months, and other people you're working with may not be able to respond and anywhere in that range. And so having a board or a very clear chart of dependencies of what things need to be done before other things is very helpful in staying organized and staying on top of that.
Well, that is really cool. Nobody has yet talked about corporatizing our work. And you said project manage. It sounds like you have a lot of an engineering type way of thinking about you. And I'm curious, did you come about that naturally? Is that something like you grew up with an engineering, someone in the family, or you took classes, or do you think that's part of, is it something you purposely tried to develop as following, the function of the nature of your work that you felt you had to develop that versus it
purely
being, a skill that you were born, an innate talent per se?
Yeah, no, purely a survival skill developed over time. I think, I was a math and chemistry major in undergrad, and so a lot of the work was more deep and focused and less interruptible, let's say. And I wisely or unwisely chose a career that gives me quite a bit of time flexibility, but in the sense that when I'm generally available, I'm very interruptible. The pager may go off at any second now, and you may hear me have to run off the phone quickly, but that's sort of the price of it. And it matched up with a lot of my clinical and academic interest as well. But the thinking of it in terms of more, project oriented or engineering oriented was really just seeing that there were so many things that had to be done, and rather than spending so much time on emails and making endless paper lists of checkboxes, that you end up with a list of lists just so you can figure out where in the stack of paper it is. I thought that there's got to be a better way, and at first I played around with like Excel and writing algorithms to make it make sense, and then figured out that there were some commercial products that did this essentially, and I've tried a few of them and found them very helpful.
You're preaching to the choir here. I love a good process. I'm wondering the nature of your job, where you are an emergency physician and you have to be able to, again, on a dime, quickly pivot to literally save a life. How does that translate to your research work? How do you get into that deep thinking, writing space when your brain is so programmed to almost, I don't want to say anticipate, but be prepared to hop, skip over to the next thing quickly? Is that a challenge for you, or how have you figured out to tell the brain, okay, I'm not on, so I do have the latitude and the space to go deep and rest and be here, versus that kind of awareness of at any moment now the pager's going to go off?
Yeah, no, it's a huge challenge, and I think it's one of the things that has been several years in trying to figure out how do you address that and really get into that thinking space where you're able to sit back and develop a complex idea. And I think it's quite a contrast from the undergrad experience of having an empty room full of, old school chalkboards by myself, where I can literally put thoughts out in a visual space and walk around them and have as much time as I need to do it, to being swamped with other things and potentially multiple emergencies at the same time and not really knowing what to expect. I think that in terms of how do you flip on and off has really come about with, trying to take care of your physical and mental health, or trying to find ways to mentally exercise to stay centered, so that when you do have an opportunity to do that, you can clear your head and be able to do that kind of work. And I think it's like having appropriately set expectations for that also helps and prevents some frustration of like, why can't I think straight? Why am I so tired and foggy? And then understanding that like when you are exhausted and need to go through some of these steps to recover, that's something that needs to have similar priorities to other things that, also are, of course, important and need to be done. So really focusing on that and maximizing the amount of time that you do it. And I think that the price of it is flexibility. And sometimes it means you're doing work at midnight or 1 a.m, or waking up at 3 and going to bed at 4 p.m. And it happens when it happens, but having a little more relaxed attitude towards the clock and focusing on that as a priority has been quite helpful.
Focusing on the clock, or less focus on the clock. I found a silver lining these past 10 months has been just that the time is more fluid to me. So, back maybe a year ago in our leadership classes, I may have bristled when someone would have said, well, you just got to figure it out. Dr. Kent, maybe you just have to do your research work from midnight to 4 a.m. I would have tackled the person from across the room saying, don't you dare tell our faculty that they have to work. Their only time to work is from midnight to 4. And so still, of course, we want to be very cautious of burning out faculty. We absolutely do not endorse that. And because of this new COVID or temporary normal, I found myself that time is much more fluid, that rather than cramming everything crazily into my day, I'm putting air quotes up now, that it's now my work time is 7 days a week. And if I feel like, going to the gym in the afternoon to beat the COVID crowds, I'll go mid-afternoon to the gym. But now I could be working later in the evening, or Saturdays and Sundays are more likely to happen for me than in the olden days because of that mindset. And so I think, and I'm not saying this just to say that this is a new reality, this is the way it works, this is the way it's always going to be, but I'm tapping into what you said earlier, that it sounds like you have a real keen mindfulness, awareness, just situations as they shift and change, and you're not so austere or so strict with a schedule. Because sometimes, as you know, people like me who are very much into like an agenda, like a schedule, that gives some kind of comfort and safety of knowing a schedule. It can also lock you into this sense of thou shalt and thou must, and then you are up against the clock. Versus this more fluid mindset of letting things happen when they happen. Organized chaos. I don't know. What am I trying to say here? I mean, does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, I think you're getting at a lot of the value of why people like schedules in the first place, and it allows you to protect yourself, and in terms of like being able to take care of these other non-work functions and avoid the burnout and that kind of thing. And I think the danger in these more flexible times, is that it does creep into other parts of your life that you may not necessarily want it to be. And it takes a lot of, I think, practice and discipline and forgiving yourself, if nothing else, to be able to kind of come back and readdress, it's like, did I not value, my friends and family, my own emotional health, in which, a lot of times can sound like that's a luxury, but in reality, I think is if you're not taking care of that, you're not going to be able to perform those deep work functions. I mean, I think I can train people to burn the candle, like not just at both ends, but throw the whole thing in the fire all day and train them like a Navy SEAL, and they can work 120 hours a week. And I've done that. But the problem is you lose the ability to take a step back and be strategic. And it's, how do you keep that skill up to be able to do it, but at the same time kind of start to slowly ratchet back and then, incorporate these other things and take a longer perspective. And I think that's really, the challenge I deal with every day. And I think a lot of people in the junior faculty role, especially in the surgical departments and, other similar kind of non-scheduled specialties or critical care, that kind of thing, can have similar effects.
Yeah, the problem with that is the Navy SEAL approach is you can't sustain it. We talk about that in WAGs, writing accountability groups, that you can't sustain a binge. So you could have a season of we're all writing our pants off to make this grant application deadline, but you're not going to be able to sustain that level of writing and productivity long term. You will be exhausted. Nobody can sustain a marathon every day, I guess, unless you're Forrest Gump. But then you will burn out, and then everything else will suffer. So, yeah,
caffeine and adrenaline help.
Yeah.
But yeah, you suffer for it. It's not a free pass.
Yeah.
Like you said.
So people are maybe listening to us right now saying, okay, this waxing poetic sounds wonderful, but tell me, Dr. Kent, what 1, 2, 3, 4, what specific things or recommendations do you have for someone like you out there who's a junior faculty person and they're listening to this going, this sounds nice for you, but I don't know what should I literally do?
I'm glad you asked. I literally have the meeting I have after this one is with a resident who's having some similar struggles, and I'm going to have to come up with that anyway. So, I made a commitment several years ago now when I was in the middle of residency to not give up reading things that weren't work. And so since 2010, probably, I've read about 60 books a year. And I think over time, the content has changed a little bit and been from, initially I think it was more to make my brain think in ways that wasn't just surgical work, and a lot of fiction and ideas and things like that. And now I've tried to hone it a little more into things that are a little more challenging in terms of new ideas or things I don't particularly enjoy, but that help me, once I've read them, think about problems in a different way.
Very good.
And it's sort of a mental exercise.
Love it.
Exercise, I talked about a little bit earlier, but I think, some people are like, I get up in the morning and I make myself do it, and it's just so important. And I've never been that person. I'm every time I've tried to get up and work out in the morning, it's been like the worst decision I've made all day. I feel terrible. I can't focus. Nothing gets done. And so I like for everybody out there that's like, oh man, I get so disheartened by these people that seem to have so much energy in the morning. I'm like, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, I'm with you too. That makes me mad. And when I I do like on the weekends I'll work out, but I'm usually mad when I'm doing it. And then because for me, my workout every day is at the end of the day for me to blow off steam.
Yeah.
And my brain can like kind of turn off and I just go. And that's my favorite part of my day is at the end of it. So if I do my favorite thing in the morning, then I'm sad and mad the rest of the day.
Now I got to go to those stuff. Yeah. No, 100%. And I think I'm definitely a fan of that, like 8 p.m. workout. And, you do and get, like you said, you can let that cerebral part of your brain go and let the cerebellum do some work and then have a good sweat and feel like you did something. And it's just, it makes a lot of that like accumulated tension and stress of the day go away. And I found that that's actually a really great time, like that post workout, to sit and do sort of focus exercises and, meditation if that's one way to do that, or if it's more kind of, I would say almost a physical meditation, like kind of making sure that, you are present in what you're doing and where your positions are and those sorts of relaxing exercises. And I think those have been very helpful.
Yeah.
In terms of taking that step back. I think in terms of more of, maybe practical tips and tricks, I've found that if you limit your email access, maybe counterintuitively, you end up getting more done, or I do.
Right.
I will typically sort of make the rule that, I'll check emails in the morning and then in the afternoon. I break that rule all the time. But when I do stick to it, it is, I think, more productive, and I'm very rarely miss anything that is time sensitive. Just with I also have the phone and everything like that, but limiting the venues by which I'm interruptible, and I think rather than just learning how to say no, it's sort of learning ways to limit access, or at least limit interruptible access.
Right.
Not that you're necessarily going to be able to say no to everything that comes in, but that it allows you to process that in a predictable way.
On your time and not your phone or your gadget's time.
Right.
Or other people's time.
Other thing, running meetings, I found that if you do the pre-work of making sure you have your pre-meetings with everybody else that's supposed to be there, and think of it almost like a policy analysis, and you're constructing a landscape and figuring out who has equity in whatever you're discussing and what they want, the meetings go much smoother. And not only do you go faster in the meeting and can end on time, you can avoid having a lot of extra meetings. One of my biggest pet peeves is planning to plan. It's like, let's have this meeting. And it's like, okay, well, we'll come back here in a week and we'll talk about this after we've thought about it. And I think the better approach is think about it before the meeting. You know where the problems are, and then use the meeting as a tool to have consensus agreement and commitment happen, which has allowed me, I think, be a lot more efficient in some of these quality improvement projects and project implementation.
Oh, that's that. Is that it? Is that your list? Oh, here I'm madly like writing down notes, going, this is great. But talk about efficiency. I was just going to say the theme with you, Dr. Kent, is efficiency, and a list of 4 things, super efficient. This has been wonderful. Did you have anything else to share with us, Dr. Kent?
I mean, I think those are the main things. It limit the times where you're interruptible to the extent that you can. Make sure you do things to sort of exercise and hone your mind and concentrating ability, and be a balanced brain or balanced human, and don't under prioritize that. I think that when you sort of rob Peter to pay Paul, to use the aphorism, I think that it does catch up in the end, and you end up not being able to do those kinds of deep work that you want to do if you're not taking care of your personal life, your mental health, your physical health with a lot of these. And, that's the temptation. It's to just push and push and push and work on the thing that is at least the seemingly one important thing. But if you're neglecting the other parts, I think that you are not able to complete those things that you want to complete in the long run.
That's right. The system cannot hold if the parts are falling apart. You're making me think of something I always remind myself and remind my mentees when I coach them is just remember, we're human beings, not human doings. So although, doing is an important part of what we are, first and foremost, you are a human being. Just so don't kill yourself or beat yourself up for just being rather than feeling like you always have to be doing. Otherwise, you won't be able to do unless you be at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah, well, you've been giving us some great advice. I love the recommendations. Friends, you've been learning from Dr. Alistair Kent, and who better to teach us about efficiencies and being whole than an emergency doc doing emergency surgery. So thank you, Dr. Kent, for joining us on the Habits and Hacks from Hopkins. And friends out there, tell everybody else to join us on the Faculty Factory podcast. Till next time, see you later. Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.